Good morning. You have entered the Sunday service of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of San Miguel de Allende. Although our fellowship is based in San Miguel, where we are a gathering with participants who are located at any given moment in dozens of places. So Zoom allows us to be together and connect with each other and share this experience. We are delighted to welcome you all here today, regardless of where you are in the world, whatever your religious background or lack thereof, whatever your nationality, ethnicity, your gender identity, your sexual orientation, or whoever you love. There is no need to hide or pretend that you are something other than your truest and best self. We welcome you gladly. My name is Judith Genya. I am your service leader today. I'm also a member here of the nominating committee and the Sunday service committee. Please look now in your order of service, which is you're holding or it's available online, and you're going to find announcements about life in the fellowship. You can also find information about activities and other projects you can join or support, and how to become a leader, how to become a member. Just go to www.UUFSMA.org. After the service, those who are on Zoom are invited to stay connected and visit with others in the main room for discussion. Those of us who are here at the Aldea can join us for coffee and cookies over there. So I would like now to welcome visitors. So if you are a visitor today, okay, we have some people who actually gave their name. So Marcia Stein from Rancho Mirage, would you please stand? Sebastian from Florida. Mary Lou from Florida. Niantic from Minnesota. George from New York. Is George here somewhere? Oh, that must be you. You're still George today, right? Okay, Carolyn from San Diego. And Steve and Rebecca from Arkansas. And it's such a pleasure to have as a visitor today Ray DeVroe with us. Ray was secretary of the board and made coffee for many years here. Ray, would you stand up? Welcome. If you are a visitor on Zoom, please type your name and where you are in the chat box so we can greet you later. Another announcement is that if you want to vote in the August congregational meeting, you must become a member by today. So make sure that you sign up. See there? There's our lovely Robin waving at you, and she'll have whatever you need to sign up. Okay, so we begin our service each week by lighting the chalice, a symbol of our Unitarian Universalist tradition. Here are some words for our chalice lighting. This is Love Can Transform the World by Maureen Killeron. Love is the aspiration, the spirit that moves and inspires this faith we share. Rightly understood, love can nurture our spirits and transform the world. May the flame of this chalice honor and embody the power and the blessing of the love we need, the love we give, the love we are challenged always to remember and to share. And now Kathy will read that in Spanish.
El amor es la aspiración, el espíritu que mueve e inspira esta fe que compartimos. Correctamente entendido, el amor puede nutrir nuestros espíritus y transformar el mundo. Que la llama de este cáliz honre y encarne el poder y la bendición del amor que necesitamos, el amor que damos, el amor que siempre tenemos el desafío de recordar y compartir.
Good morning. I'm the Reverend Tom Rosiello, minister of the fellowship. And again today, I, like many of you, am not in San Miguel, but we are together thanks to the wonderful technology of Zoom and the hard work of our wonderful and skilled staff members. I'm joining you from our Lake Cottage in Massachusetts. Now, you probably know that our Unitarian Universalist General Assembly was held a few weeks ago. For this annual event, the ministers arrive a few days before other delegates and participate in what's called Ministry Days. It is a time to reconnect, share resources, offer each other support, and talk frankly with each other about our profession and the opportunities and especially the challenges that we face. Again, this year it was wonderful for me to see old colleagues and meet new ones. At this gathering of new and longtime ministers and those in between, we cannot help but explore with each other why it is that we do this work. We sometimes wonder why we went into this profession, why we continue to do it, even if we might be retired or be doing something else. It's certainly not for the money. It is certainly not for a stress-free life. For me, and for most ministers I know, it is because we have a strong sense that we are doing so in response to a calling. So what's this thing I'm referring to as a calling? Well, you might say that it's a strong inner impulse to pursue a particular course of action or way of life. A voice, be it the voice of God or the voice of conscience, whatever your theological view, that speaks to us saying, this is the way, this is your path. This calling is something so central to us that it defines and it colors all that we do. Now, of course, it's certainly not just ministers that have this experience. I know doctors and lawyers and teachers and social workers and artists and musicians. I know protesters and volunteers who maybe feed the hungry or shelter the homeless or stand for justice. All who do what they do because they feel called to do that work. For some, that calling is very clear, for others, rather vague. And there are always challenges to our callings. There are always forces in our life that point in other directions, perhaps steering us away from our calling. Yet, again and again, the voice of a true calling comes back to us and asks us to answer the call again. Now, this is true for us as individuals, but I believe it's also true for us in a collective sense, as a community of faith, a religious tradition, a covenanted community. So I think we need to ask ourselves, what is our calling as Unitarian Universalists? In today's service, we'll explore the idea that our calling is love. And if it is, how we embrace that calling, not just as a matter of individual conscience and faith, but collectively, embracing that calling as a community, as a denomination, as the faith tradition. Our calling should be what charts our path, guides our actions. It should be what we proclaim to the world, the center of our message. It should be the foundation upon which our actions rest. If love is our calling, if love is our central tenet or belief, then as leaders in a congregation or in a movement, we must lead with love. Always, not sometimes, not on some issues, for some people, but always. And as members, often asked to decide sometimes difficult issues, we must discuss with love and vote with love. And for times when folks are injured or hurt, angry or sad, we must begin again and again in love. Emboldened by this liberal faith, we unite as one. We must always be answering the call of love. Please join in singing the hymn by that name. The words will appear on your screen momentarily.
The promise of the Spirit, faith, hope, and love abide, and so every soul is blessed and made whole. The truth in our hearts is our guide. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one, emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim we are answering the call of love. Sometimes we build a barrier to keep love tightly bound, corrupted by fear, unwilling to hear, denying the beauty we found. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one, emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim we are answering the call of love. A bright new day is dawning, when love will not divide. Reflections of grace in every embrace, fulfilling the vision divine. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one, emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim we are answering the call of love. We are answering the call of love.
Ending as we recite together our covenant. First in English with me, and then with Spanish with Diana. The words will appear on the screen. We respect the interdependent way of life and work for a just and peaceful world. We encourage the search for truth and meaning, strive for compassion in our relationships, and seek benefits that will benefit. This is our covenant.
Respetamos todos los estilos de vida dentro de su red interdependiente y trabajamos por un mundo justo y pacífico. Alentamos la búsqueda de la verdad y la comprensión total. Nos esforzamos por mantener compasión en nuestras relaciones y buscamos valores que beneficien nuestras vidas y las vidas de los demás. Este es nuestro convenio.
We now enter into a very sacred time in our service, a time when members and friends share significant joys, sorrows, and concerns with their community. If you have a joy, sorrow, or concern that you would like to have shared in an upcoming service, please email it to me. If you're with us via Zoom today, you can share one now by typing it into the chat. And some of you may have written joy, sorrows, or concerns on cards as you entered the room this morning, and those will be shared after I complete the ones I've received in advance. Before I begin, I want to remind you that even though I'm not in San Miguel, if you are in need of pastoral care or would like to talk with a minister or need help from our care team, please do not hesitate to contact me or them. And also, for the next month, the Reverend Louise Green will be our guest minister. She will be taking on the responsibility of pastoral care as well for the month. If you're in need of pastoral care, either email me and I will get a message to her, or see her after a service on one of the next 4 Sundays and ask her directly. We now turn to today's joy, sorrows, and concerns. And as we share each one, we'll light a candle at the Aldea, acknowledging that that person or that prayer or that thought is held by all of us this morning. Our first is a joy from Kate Greenaway. Dawn and Kate want to share their joy and profound relief with the progress their son is making. She writes, after many years of struggling with addiction and homelessness, Udon has been clean for 2 years now, and addiction no longer defines him. Although his brain injury has had lasting effects, it hasn't stopped him from becoming a responsible, hardworking, and sincere member of our family. He will be joining us when we return to San Miguel in late August for a short holiday, and we can't wait for everyone to meet him. Our next candle comes from so many of you who wrote asking that we send thoughts, prayers, and get well wishes to Susan McDonald. She had successful back surgery in Virginia on Thursday, and she's getting lots of support from her sister and friends. She had been experiencing quite a bit of pain, and we hope that the pain is under control and the healing and recuperation are underway. Please hold her in your prayers and send her your get well wishes. I know she'll appreciate it. Our next candle may seem just a bit beyond our community, but you'll see why. I'd like to light a candle in remembrance for the famous singer Tony Bennett, who passed away this week, and especially highlight his connection with our faith. He was very active and an outspoken person on many of the causes we believe in. During the March on Selma, when many Unitarian Universalist ministers and lay people joined Dr. King, which you may not know is so did Tony Bennett. And you may know the story of our UU martyr, Viola Liuzzo, who was shot and killed by the Ku Klux Klan while driving people to and from the march. The last trip she drove before the one where she was fatally shot was to drive Tony Bennett. And now we light a candle for those in our fellowship who have undergone significant medical treatment or experienced a healthcare situation and are on the road to recovery. Joan Wolfe, Donna Sherbrooks, and Liz Stone. And we light a candle and hold in our hearts all those who are experiencing health challenges now and going through the stressful time of awaiting test results. Whatever the results, we pray they will get the best medical treatment possible and the support they need to meet the challenges. We light a candle and hold in our hearts also those receiving treatment now for cancer and other long illnesses. We want them to know that they have our support. Kirsten Michael has asked that we light a candle marking the anniversary of Wayland's passing and for Scampy, who recently crossed the Rainbow Bridge also. As we do, we remember the love and support so many of us have received from our animal friends, and we hold them too in our hearts. And now we go to the Aldea for any joys and concerns that may have been submitted this morning.
This candle is for joy to remember Susan DeVoe, a lifetime San Miguel Unitarian member. She is with me and her husband I'm reading this card, Roy, as we celebrate this wonderful community. And I have a very big sorrow from myself. My friend of 60 years, a dear beloved friend, suddenly died this week, and it's a huge loss for me. Are there any other?
No, just back to Tom.
What?
Back to Tom.
Okay. What?
Now we go back to Tom.
Oh, and now we're going to go back to Tom, and then we'll come back to me. But right now we're going back to Tom. Okay.
And now we light the blue and yellow candle again for those who have been killed or lost loved ones or otherwise suffered due to the unjust and unprovoked war in Ukraine. We also have a joy on Zoom that I see, and that is that Chris Chase will be going back to San Miguel tomorrow, and we can welcome her back. Finally, we light a candle for all the joys, sorrows, and concerns held deep in our hearts this morning, but remain unspoken. And now, as we enter into a time of meditation and prayer guided by music performed by Malcolm on a historic New England pipe organ, those who are at the Aldea that would like to light a silent candle, perhaps as a way to give personal witness to a joy, sorrow, or concern that you're holding today, or to give significance to a prayer in your heart, may come forward and do so now. Our reading this morning is from the Reverend Bob Janis, and Ann Geyer has generously translated it into Spanish for us. That translation is printed in both the online and the paper order of service that was handed out at the Aldea. And I'll give those of you for whom it might be helpful to have that Spanish translation just a moment to go to it before I start. There is a power that Rosa Parks carried with her onto that bus as she withstood the glares and threats and sat for her people. That same power was shared by children and clergy on the streets of Selma shared by the proud drag queens of Stonewall, shared by the generations at Standing Rock. That power could not be held by Robben Island Prison or the jails of Birmingham and Concord. It was in those hands that washed the feet of the beloved in Judea, and in the hands that rescued a baby in a basket on the Nile. This power builds congregations, animates poets, nourishes the powerless, and wears down the machinery of empire upon the compost heap. It is as close to us as breathing and stronger than death. We name this power as love, and we claim this love as our own calling throughout our life and with every day to enliven our fundamental interdependence, to make our felt connections with the universe ever more beautiful by engaging in the creative work of justice, kindness, and liberation. Love is natural and sublime, an integral part of the makeup of the cosmos. Even the stars are attracted to one another. But love in human cast is more than mere attraction. As part of the delicate balance of all life, we are called to use our powers in the service of the greatest good. Love calls us to treat as worthy every individual. Since every unique individual is to be cherished, diversity is essential and holy. Love's people are all people. Because love wants its people fed and safe and free and given every opportunity to blossom, love lives out loud as justice, acknowledging and then dismantling the oppressions of racism, sexism, homophobia, ableism, and all the various ways we systematically fail to cherish one another. Love calls us to a generosity of spirit. As gardeners of the good, we cultivate a spirit of gratitude and hope. Again and again, we let go of what holds us back, choosing forgiveness, charity, and humility, where these open-handed choices might lead us being part of something better and grander than any of us can hold alone. We are the inheritors of a living and evolving tradition, covenant together boldly to live out our lives and give of ourselves to love. The text for our second reading comes from the first book of Corinthians, chapter 13. And instead of reading that, we are going to together sing it as it's expressed in hymn number 34. The words will also appear on the screen.
Though I may speak with bravest fire and have the gift to all inspire, and have not love, my words are vain as sounding brass and hopeless gain. Though I may give all I possess, and striving so my love profess, but not begin my love within, the prophet soon turns strangely thin. Come, Spirit, come, our hearts control, our spirits long to be made whole. Let inward love guide every deed. By this we worship and are freed.
A couple of weeks ago, I and several of your fellowship members attended the Unitarian Universalist General Assembly in Pittsburgh. The main item of discussion was the revision to Article 2 of our UUA bylaws. This is the section where statements of both the principles and the sources of our faith are contained. The proposed revision is the result of a required study and review process that happens every 15 years. This is an elaborate multi-year process. It's been underway for several years with discussions and input gathered from thousands of Unitarian Universalists. To make changes to this section requires an affirmative vote at 2 General Assemblies. We, the delegates on your behalf at this General Assembly, voted favorably and by a large margin to pass the resolution to study the proposal for the next year when a final vote on adoption will take place. Those principles expressed in Article 2 have been around for a while. They're familiar, comfortable to us, perhaps even more than comfortable. Perhaps they've become so ingrained in the fabric that they function more like a creed, more like dogma. I know we don't like to think of ourselves in those terms. We say we don't have dogma, don't have a creed, that we are a living tradition and therefore changes are just part of who we are. And we live in a changing world, and we know that requires us to consider again and again what should be the message of this faith for this time. Nonetheless, these principles are old friends. So for many, the idea of changing them is a difficult one. Now, the original statement of our UU principles and purposes were drafted when the 2 denominations, Unitarian and Universalist, merged in 1961. It was a carefully crafted statement of what the 2 denominations at that time could agree represented the beliefs they share, and probably more importantly, what this new denomination would have to offer the world. Those 1961 drafters tried to go beyond what had been rather heady ideas that were often in the past articulated to be our uniting principles. In the words of the Reverend Jean Pickett, the old watchwords of liberalism, freedom, reason, tolerance, worthy though they may be, were simply not catching the imagination of the world. They described a process for approaching the religious steps, but they testified to no intimate acquaintance with the depths themselves. If we are ever to speak to a new age, we must supplement our seeking with some profound religious finds. The principles drafted were not really new ideas, but an attempt to better express who we really are and to provide tools to help us meet the issues of that time. Perhaps words less of the head and more of the heart, but hold that thought because many will criticize the current principles today as we consider changing them as being too cerebral. Well, I won't go into the original text except to say it was loaded with sexist language. Ministers were always referred to as he, human beings were referred to as man and mankind. So at a convention of Unitarian Universalist women in the 1980s, the question was debated by them, do the UU principles speak for us? The answer was a resounding no. What had not been an issue in 1961 was front and center by the 1980s. Times had changed, and the old idea that, of course, words like mankind included women were no longer acceptable. So this group revised the 1961 document using more inclusive language, and in 1984, amazingly, the first 6 principles we now affirm were adopted by nearly unanimous vote. Those first 6, you'll remember, the inherent worth and dignity of every person, justice, equity, and compassion in human relationships, acceptance of one another, and encouragement of spiritual growth in our congregations, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, were now firmly in place. But did you catch? I said 6 principles. And you know, we have 7 principles today. So how did that happen? Well, in the 1990s, the environmental movement had come into full swing. And there was a growing recognition that our planet was very fragile and that human beings' well-being depended upon the well-being of the planet. A recognition that we were inseparably connected to the natural world of all existence was in vogue. New morality, if you will, that included more than just how humans treated humans was seen as necessary. So thanks to those who were passionate about caring for the earth, our 7th principle, the respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we were a part, was added. It was also at that time when a 6th source was added to our faith. We realized that something was missing in the other 5. It was a lack of recognition of the deep truth that the natural world and those who center that in their religion have to teach us. And thus we added to our sources spiritual teachings of earth-centered traditions which celebrate the sacred circle of life and instruct us to live in harmony with the rhythms of nature. This was added to Jewish and Christian teachings, wisdom from other world religions, direct experience of the transcendent mystery of wonder, and words and deeds of those who challenge us to confront power and struggles of evil with justice, compassion, and the transforming power of love. Hang on to that thread, the transforming power of love, because we're going to pull it forward in a few minutes. In the required review of Article 2 that had taken place 15 years earlier, it was decided to leave this important section unchanged. So our statements of principles and sources has stayed the same for 30 years. It's a long time, and a lot's happened in our world in the past 30 years. Now, those principles have served us well in many ways, as personal codes of ethics, as shared values to guide our actions within and beyond our fellowship, as a framework for religious education and sermon writing, and even as tools of evangelism. But if we reflect for a moment, we are not the same faith tradition we were 30 years ago. And might not that require some new words to capture who we now strive to be? Some think these principles should never be changed. Maybe we could just do a better job of interpreting them or applying them. And well, if we were a church with a creed and with a dogma, that would be what we would have to do. It would be our only choice, but we're not. For us, revelation is not sealed and limited to some single ancient source. It's ongoing, happening right now. So we need to be clear about who we are in the context of this time. That is, in fact, why the UUA bylaws require this review every 15 years. We've changed and the world has changed. And for some, these present principles have turned out not to be as inclusive as they could be and are not sufficiently giving us the tools, the motivation, and the inspiration to address the issues of our time. For example, over the years, animal rights activists among us have proposed that our first principle, the inherent worth and dignity of every person, should be changed to every being. And similarly, in our second principle, compassion should not be limited to just human relationships. Also, within the past few years, discomfort with other language in the principles and sources has arisen. As we grow to embrace our trans and non-binary community, do we really want to say that we're inspired by prophetic deeds of just men and women? Of recent, there has been a move to add an 8th principle. And why was that? Because the other principles we had were not clearly expressing and sufficiently motivating us to do the hard work of anti-racism, of addressing the role of white supremacy culture. Many congregations, in fact, adopted this principle, though the denomination as a whole did not, mostly because it's been preempted by this process. Each time, when we've made a change to our principles and purposes, it has brought us to change the way that we think about who we are as a faith tradition. We refocus, we see through a new lens. We have new language to speak of in our faith, a new framework to see ourselves, a new and hopefully more relevant and more accessible message to bring to the world. Not a rejection of the old, a reframing, a reimagining, a redefining, a reprioritizing, a regrounding. So in a nutshell, what the proposed Article 2 does is to proclaim love as the center of our faith. And as the center, it is from love that our values, our commitments, our principles, and our actions spring out or radiate. Maybe saying that, all you need is love, it's just love might feel a bit too touchy-feely, a bit too hippie-ish, not rigorous enough, not intellectual enough. Really? Or is it a way to make our message more acceptable, our self-understanding a bit more in the heart than in the head, a way to connect those previous standalone values and principles? Well, I hope I haven't bored you with this history, because I think it's important that we understand what is happening at the present moment as part of a long journey. And if we look back much further, more than the 60 or 70 years since the articles came about, but hundreds of years, we see that we have constantly been on a journey of defining what is at our core, our center. We've confronted challenges, embraced new knowledge, and rigorously crafted and recrafted our faith to be meaningful in each new context. For some, I know the proposed Article 2 revisions feel like a big change, even an abandonment of our history. I, for one, feel exactly the opposite, particularly if we really look at the long path of our history. In fact, I would say it might have been those 7 principles we lived with for the last 60, 70 years that were more of the departure. Our early Christian roots had 2 essential teachings: love of God and love of one another. Over the centuries, sadly, Christianity evolved in another direction to become more a religion of fearing and judgment. But our Universalist forebears renewed the ideas of this early Christianity and said, no, religion should be not based on fear of eternal damnation, for a loving God damns no one. On both sides of our faith tradition, we broke away from those New England Calvinists who believed fear of God was essential for people to live moral lives, and we said just the opposite. The gospel of universalism was and is so simple. God is love and love is God. Theistically speaking or not, universalism has always taught that love is the center of our faith. To put it another way, the greatest force in the universe is love, and love is what we claim as of ultimate importance. Universalist Josiah Ballou in the early 1800s put it this way: if we agree in love, there is no disagreement that can do us any injury. But if we do not, no other agreement can do us any good. On the Unitarian side, the 16th century Unitarian minister from Transylvania, Francis David, is reported to have said, "We don't have to believe alike to love alike." A statement that recognizes our freedom of belief and our welcoming of diverse theologies, while at the same time saying they don't matter, because underneath all this is the centrality of the power of love. And many of you, I suspect, come from UU congregations like the one I served in Massachusetts that recited each week a particular covenant written in 1894 by the Reverend James Villa Blake. Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. The first word of that simple covenant that binds so many UU congregations together is love. We have a wonderful covenant here, but I have to say I sometimes miss the congregation standing and forcefully shouting out the word love to begin the covenant. It always reminds me that's where we start. The way I read our history, love is in every verse, and it has always been the force that animates us. You remember I asked you to hold on to a thread when I was discussing our sources as expressed in the present Article 2? There is a recognition of the role of the transforming power of love and faith there, but it's rather buried. It's time to pull it to the center, where I suggest to you, over the long haul, it has always been. Love is the place from which our values and principles spring. And quite beautifully, I think, the Article 2 Study Commission has found a way to capture this in a diagram. And I'd like to ask Diego to put up the diagram for you now. I'll give it a moment to pause, and then when the diagram is up, I will speak to you a bit about it. What I see in the diagram is love burning with intensity, unable to be extinguished, and at the center of our faith as symbolized by the fact that it is held in our chalice. And I see radiating from the love our principles, values, ideas that are grounded in love. They are ways that love is understood in different situations. Goals of a faith community based on love. Obligations of a faith community that centers love. Looking at the diagram, perhaps you see those branches as petals of a flower with the center love. I see it in a much more active way, of revolving winds that blow from the core. If we go around the circle of those things that spin off from love, I first see justice. The Black theologian Cornel West wrote, "Justice is what love looks like in public." Whether in words or deeds, a religion that centers love has no choice but to proclaim justice. And if we move to the next spin-off, interdependence, we're reminded of the words of Martin Luther King Jr., that we are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Love has to be the glue that binds us in our interdependence. And we are reminded that our love must be greater than just for our fellow human beings, because our interdependent web is greater. We make love real in our care for the planet and the natural world, as well as in our connection to other people. Then the spin-off of equity reminds us that this kind of love can have no favorites. In the eyes of love, through the lens of love, everyone is of equal worth and dignity. Then labeling transformation as a spin-off of love acknowledges the powerful force that love can be. More powerful than faith, more powerful than fear. We are changed by love, and love has the power to change the world in profound ways. Pluralism, in the context of being an extension of love, reminds us that those words, sometimes attributed to Francis David that I mentioned earlier, we don't have to believe alike to love alike. But let's take it a step further. We don't have to look alike, or love the same kind of a partner, or be able to do the same things. As Bob Janis put it in his reading I shared, love's people are all people. Finally, if love is our center, we can't just hold on to it. It must be given away generously. As my teacher, the late Reverend John Shelby Spong, used to remind us, what we're called to is to love wastefully. We do that in many ways, but certainly we cannot be part of a faith that centers love and be miserly people, holding back on sharing our gifts and our resources. Supporting an institution that centers love as generously as we can is how we make that faith real. Diego, you can take down the diagram now. I don't know about you, but I want to tell you that I want to be part of a faith tradition that makes it clear that love is its center. that it is from love that our values and principles spring, a faith that is guided by love in making decisions and taking actions, a tradition that acknowledges that it is love that calls to us, and it is love that we are called to bring to others. Too many religions preach fear, even hate, judgment, certainly a lack of tolerance and an exclusivity. Our calling is to proclaim love for everyone without exception, and in our actions, among us and beyond us, we must lead with love, for that is who we are. The 18th century founder of our Universalist faith tradition, John Mary, put it in words of his time, writing to his followers, "Go out into the highways and byways, give the people blanketed in decay and crumbling Calvinism something of your new vision. You possess only a small light, but uncover it and let it shine. Use it in order to bring more light and understanding to the hearts and minds of all people. Give them not hell, but hope and courage, and preach kindness and the everlasting love of God." From ancient times and ancient words until this day, it is and has been our calling to center love and to lead with love.
You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Don't give up hope. Don't give up hope. You're not alone. You're not alone. Just move ahead. Just move ahead. Keep moving on. Keep moving on. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Lift up your eyes. Lift up your eyes. Don't you despair. Don't you despair. Look up ahead. Look up ahead. The path is there. The path is there. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. I know you're scared. I know you're scared. And I'm scared too. And I'm scared too. But here I am. But here I am. Right next to you. Right next to you. Hey, we got it. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. 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 All right. Amen.
We have now come to the time in our service when we open our hearts and wallets and share. Why do we give? Our fellowship generously gives support to local NGOs who help the local communities in many ways. That is one reason why we give. Other reasons why we give are to remind ourselves of how many gifts we have to offer. We give to remember that we are part of something bigger than ourselves. We give because we believe in music and sacred space and community. We give with the faith that together we have enough. We all have so many needs, 1,000 prayers and 1,000 needs that really only needs one answer, that the world is not indifferent, and we may live and be with one another in ways that show this truth, that no matter what the day brings, that we will not be indifferent to each other. We make the offering to sustain and strengthen this place that is sacred to so many of us, a community with memory, hope, and love. The late Buddhist monk and teacher Thich Nhat Hanh says, "Give generously so as to discover abundance." He explains, if you give and continue to give, you become richer and richer all the time, richer in terms of happiness and well-being. This may seem strange, but it's always true. Individually and together, we Unitarian Universalists are building toward a world filled with more peace, justice, love, and joy. The practice of giving helps us bring the realm of love that you've just heard about alive in our lives. I'm going to close by singing a very short little song that I taught when I had a preschool. Love is something when you give it away, give it away, give it away. Love is something when you give it away, it keeps on giving more. It's just like having a magic penny. Hold it close and you won't have any. Lend it, spend it, you'll have so many. They'll roll right over the door. 'Cause love is something when you give it away, you end up having more. Thanks for indulging me. Our offers will now be collected and gratefully received.
De ti yo recibo, a ti te doy, así compartimos y vivimos hoy. From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, and from this we live. De ti yo recibo, a ti te doy, así compartimos y vivimos hoy. From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, and from this we live.
Thank you for being with us today. And I hope you'll be with us again next week, when, as I mentioned, the Reverend Louise Green will be our guest minister. Please stay after the service in person at the Aldea for coffee or on Zoom for a time of community and discussion with me. As we go forth, may that powerful force of love, which requires us to proclaim justice, invites us to be generous, which overcomes all differences, recognizes our profound interdependence with all creation, and excludes no one, be our centering force, our good news to live and to proclaim now and always. Amen. And now, as we extinguish the flame at the Aldea, we remember that we carry the light of love with us in our hearts.
you.